Thank you, George. Before we get started, I just want to thank everyone again for taking an hour out of their day to join us for this conversation on best practices and remote interviews. I know everyone is scrambling right now to address some new challenges that have come up with the COVID-19 situation. So hopefully some of this information will be beneficial to you. All right. First off, we're just going to talk about some equipment you might need to consider if you're doing remote interviews. For phone interviews, you really just need to have a phone. If you're going to have multiple people involved with the call, you're going to need a conference number. And obviously the candidate would need a phone as well, but it's pretty simple for phone interviews. However, there are a lot of advantages to a video conference interview, which we'll be going over throughout this presentation. So for a video conference interview, you're going to need a computer with a microphone and a webcam. Many programs and softwares do support various mobile options, such as cell phones and tablets. However, those can be susceptible to some technical issues, and also they're a little bit harder to use and to be really professional in. Even such things as making sure you're looking right in the camera, it just gets a little bit more difficult. So a personal computer is really best if you have that option. Considerations for your equipment. Many video conference services provide a call-in number, as some of you have used today for this meeting. If you have a poor internet connection, sometimes you can have audio issues, so the phone call can be a good option as a backup. It's really important to test all of your equipment before the interview, not only for yourself, but also instruct your candidates to do so as well. All kinds of things can come up. One of the common things that can happen is for example, audio feedback to come out of the speakers and back in through the microphone. So it's always a good idea to have like headphones or a headset handy. Just in general, this is for all remote interviews and all topics, have a plan for the unexpected. Something will come up that no one has thought of before, and you're just going to have to be flexible. So specifically, you might want to have a plan for candidates that don't have the necessary equipment for the remote interview. You may learn that even before the interview is scheduled. And also candidates who experience day of technical difficulties. Just consider what you will do if those situations arise. Next, we're going to talk about interview software for video conference interviews. There's a whole host of different platforms out there that you can use. They all come with their individual pros and cons, and you may already have some of these available through your organizations. Zoom, there's a whole host of options. Most of these allow candidates to connect for free, which is good. Just make sure that whatever you're using, make sure it's free to your candidates. You don't want them to be spending any money to facilitate their interview. People like to share documents like security agreements, other documents, even potentially assessment-related materials with your candidates. Various softwares can be used for that, like Microsoft Word. You can also use Google Documents. If you're sending anything sensitive or legal related, it's really good to make sure it's in a PDF so it can't be edited. It prevents any unforeseen issues from popping up later. The other thing you can do with some documents, if you don't want the candidate to have a copy of them, is you can host them online in like a survey platform such as SurveyMonkey. There's a lot of other options out there. Some considerations for your software. Just again, make sure it's free for all your candidates. Look into whether or not it's supported on mobile devices. While mobile devices aren't optimal, some people don't have access to a personal computer. So it's a good idea, if you can, to use something that's going to be supported on a mobile device. Again, test everything. Ensure that the software you've chosen is not going to cause you any problems or be really hard to administer while you're doing your interview process. And also, it's also important to test what the candidate experience is going to be like. So, use the help of a colleague or a friend just to see what candidates are going to go through as they go through the interview process. Moving on to administration, just some things to do before the interview. You'd have to do these anyway for in-person interviews, but with the remote setting and it being novel and prone to other issues, it's just really important to have your whole process outlined before you start. First thing you're going to want to do is determine how many candidates you actually want to interview, and based on that, figure out what your interview schedule is going to be. At that point, it's a good time to reach out to the candidates you do want to interview, and you can either assign them a time slot or try to coordinate with them as is your preference. But at this time, it's really important to have a discussion with them It's often best over the phone if you can, just to see whether or not they will be able to remote interview. Maybe there's some sort of situation that's going to prevent them from doing that, and that's going to allow you to work with them one-on-one to get that figured out proactively. And the last thing is, especially for video conferencing, make sure that you have a unique meeting link for all of your candidates. You don't want anyone accidentally joining the same meeting at the same time. That can just be very awkward, and so it's best to have unique links for everybody. Once you have all of that figured out, create like some standard way of reaching out to your candidates. An email is a really good way to have some sort of template that's going to have your start time, the duration, how to test all their equipment, what to expect in the process, have all their meeting links, the call-in number, then any other documents you might need to send them all in one place so they can reference it right before their interview and they're not looking around for a bunch of different things. It's a good idea to have a template so you can plug in specifics for each person. You can even use stuff like mail merge to make it a little bit more automated. If you're doing any sort of assessment in conjunction with your interview, such as a multiple choice or writing exercise, make sure you're really clear on how long they have to do it, when it starts, when their assessment must be submitted, how they're going to submit it, all that stuff. Candidates have a lot of questions. They're stressed out about the whole process, so it's really important to clearly outline that for everyone. And then just to have to mention it again, just because it is so important. You have a backup plan in place, if candidates do not have the equipment needed for your selection process. You don't want to be kicking people out of the process because they don't have the equipment you need on their end. That can end up disadvantaging people and lead to a whole host of issues. So just understand that you have to be flexible and maybe you have to be very creative in how you're making sure that everyone has the opportunity, provided there's someone you're interested in interviewing, to interview, and it's not affected by those circumstances. Then the day of the interview, a lot of people do back-to-back interviews, which means that you, the interviewer, and anyone else who may be part of your interview process is going to be unavailable to answer any questions that candidates have. So it's important to designate someone to answer those questions because they will happen, they will come up, and just have someone available for that. You can also do things like if you want to send someone an exercise to complete right before the interview, let's say 15 minutes before, for example, you can use other features like delayed delivery in Outlook, and there's other platforms that allow you to do stuff like this. So you can automate some of this process to really reduce the administrative burden. And then just kind of the last note, plan for the unknown. Something will happen most of the time that you didn't think of, we haven't thought of, no one has thought of. So, build some flexibility in your process. And then again, just on the fairness side, kind of pre-establish how flexible you're going to be. There's only so flexible.
Right now, I don't even know where they are. I won't even be able to find it. I can't find it at night. I don't.
We have someone who could please mute themselves. It's very loud and distracting. Thank you.
All right. So we were discussing kind of how you need to plan for the unknown and be very accommodating to your candidates. However, there are limits on how accommodating you can be, both feasibly, and then if you start to be too accommodating to some individuals, it may be unfair to others. So set the definition of how accommodating you're going to be at the front end, and then apply that in a standardized manner across all your candidates. And just be really careful not to disadvantage candidates who may have less access to technology, internet, or other resources, and that they have the full opportunity to participate in your selection process. If you're doing any sort of interview panel, you can have people join individually or as a group. There's some space considerations right now with social distancing measures that are in place. Just if you're connecting individually, it's really important you clearly define what each person's role is on the interview panel side to avoid confusing the candidate. And make sure that all the interviewers are on the same page and know exactly what the plan is, so your process goes off without a hitch the first time. Because learning as you go, even if you learn quickly, you can end up really disadvantaging your first couple candidates. It's just not ideal. And with that, I would like to turn the floor over to Layla, who will talk to you a little bit more about fairness, administration, and best practices.